All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Summer 2025 Student Hiring and Processing webinar. My name is Eric Cuevas. I am Lead HR Operations Technician, and thank you so much for joining. Um, we will have the chat feature open, but we will have a Q&A section at the end. So in case you do have questions, just to kind of keep the flow of the presentation going and to not take too many breaks in the middle, I will kind of reserve most of that time at the end for any kind of questions. Let's see. Trying to there's anything else to cover before we get started. I know we have a lot to cover. There's a lot of updates, a lot of changes to share. I'm sure there's been like rumblings and things discussed, but I'll try my best to kind of clarify everything as we get into this. So, okay, let's get started. So yes, I will be starting out right at the top with some upcoming changes that are going to affect the student assistant population. Pretty notable ones, pretty big ones. There will be more information shared at a later date, but I will try to cover as much as I know at this moment. But as far as for summer, my understanding, it will kind of, business as usual, but we'll get there when we get there. But yes, I will be going over the student processing side of things as far as the mass separation process that will be occurring at the end of May. For those of you who have been here for many years, I'm sure you're all familiar with the process that happens. For those who aren't, I will, go into detail as far as the mass separation process in relation to student assistance, and the other student job classes as well. Eligibility as far as summer enrollment goes, and the hourly student employee summer form that will be posted on our HR toolkit, as well as some time and labor exceptions, just kind of some those like general questions that people tend to ask as far as when can my students start working 40 hours? When can they move to, this job code? I'll try to clear that up as much as I can, and break it down month by month as we go. And as far as, incoming students, I'll also cover a little bit more about that as far as whether or not they're eligible to work for the summer, as well as who to contact in case you do have questions. And yes, like I mentioned, I will leave some time at the end for Q&A. Okay. So yes, it's finally happened. I know I've been mentioning it in previous webinars and um, other places where this has been discussed, but student assistants will be represented by bargaining unit R15, which falls under CSUEU, effective July 1st, 2025. Um, So what that means, there will be some job code changes. So at the moment, what I'm aware of is that the 1870 student assistant position will be um, essentially being moved over to 1860. Um, yeah, that's a new code that's being created, and that is what the departments will be using going forward. Um, as for 1871, which falls under federal work study, that will be 1861. Um, yes, there's just some changes that are being done as far as how to implement these, putting them now in a represented position, which now has, as far as like what it relates to as far as internally, more changes as far as like the processing their transactions, ensuring that they have, um, you know, the things that would pertain to a regular staff employee or to an employee who is represented. Um, we need to kind of, move away from the 1870, 1871 positions, which, had maybe more of an antiquated kind of type of processing. And again, what I'm mentioning is more just internal, maybe more just inside baseball type stuff. But um, as far as what the departments need to know, there will be some job code changes for those. As far as the 1874 or 1868, those will not be affected by this change. The job codes will remain the same. Uh, as far as payroll or HR processes, we will be handling these changes internally to create these job codes. Um, it's kind of like an all hands on deck. It affects, all of our units here in HR, from the sign-in paperwork having to be different to the processing, changing the student module, adjustments on that end, uh, just across the board, it'll be handled differently and more information will be shared with you. Um, we are planning on having a special webinar once we have more guidance from the chancellor's office. So stay tuned for more information on that. As far as summer, this will not be applicable just as of yet, even though I'm mentioning here July 1st. Um, we are kind of rolling this out to have the department start hiring the student employees under these particular classifications effective fall 2025. Um, so as far as students who are kept active as 1870 um, for the summer months due to halftime enrollment, they won't be switching over to 1860 as far as I'm aware. They'll remain as 1870 until it's time for the August pay period and we kind of revert everyone back. At that point, then we will start using the new job codes. Um, but like I mentioned, we're just awaiting more guidance and what we refer to as technical letters from the chancellor's office that provide um, more hands-on kind of guidance and instructions for the campuses to follow. So more to come on that. But yes, just needed to point that out. Yeah, just wanted to kind of talk about it just right at the beginning. But again, as far as summer is concerned, we will still be using the 1870 job code. But yes, let's get into student processing. So like I mentioned at the top, the mass separation process for summer, this is something that we handle every year. What we do is we run the mass separation process for student assistants on, usually it's the last working day of the May pay period. Unfortunately, the last, calendar day falls on a Saturday. So May 31st falls on a Saturday. So we're going to have to do it on Friday, May 30th. So all students who are not enrolled half-time or greater for the summer session will be separated. We'll be evaluating your enrollment for the students to ensure that only those who are at halftime or above in the 1870 classification will be exempt from the separation, but all the ones who are not will be separated. So what does this mean? As far as students who are, self-reporting, they need to make sure to enter their time by May 30th, 2025, no later than 5 p.m. Timekeepers can continue to enter and correct time until the scheduled time entry deadline of June 3rd, 2025. I'll go a little bit more into the specifics and kind of how this will kind of work and how to kind of evaluate for this. So the reason we do all of this, the reason we do all of these separations and we're so careful with this is because the students' enrollment basically is checked year round. However, due to the summer, the majority of students, are not usually taking courses or are not taking enough courses to meet that halftime enrollment threshold. It is something that we have to kind of monitor, a little bit more closely than we do. I mean, we do it anyways, but at least for the fall and spring, um, it's, quite rare for a student to kind of fall in this, under halftime threshold. But anyways, the reason we do this also is tax deductions on Medicare retirement will depend on the student's summer enrollment. And so the student assistants, they are FICA exempt. And to remain exempt from these taxes, they must be enrolled at CSUN at least half time during the summer. So that is 6 units if they are undergraduate or 4 units if they are at the graduate level. For the summer, we are counting enrollment cumulatively. So, if they're enrolled, 3 units in session 2 and then 3 units in session 3, well, even though those are kind of separate, we're still counting them as a total of 6. If they fall into this halftime or more during the summer, then kind of business as usual as far as 1870s would go. They can only work up to 20 hours per week. So it's kind of the trade-off, like because the students are, FICA exempt, they don't get any deductions out of their monthly checks, but the maximum they can work is 20 hours per week. So yeah, so to review, like I mentioned, student summer enrollment will determine the student assistance position. So Basically a kind of more cut and dry way to look at it. If they are enrolled halftime or more, then they will remain as 1870. But if they are enrolled under halftime, then the department will need to hire them under 1874. I'll kind of go into how you would do that. As far as how the department needs to figure out, what position or what, situation they're falling into, um, as far as the students' enrollment plans, uh, we created this form, the hourly student employee summer form, to help evaluate and help you, figure that out while you are preparing to transfer all the students over or to see who will stay, um, active. So yeah, so there's two statuses here. Status one, in the case that they are going to be enrolled less than halftime, or if they're, not enrolled in the summer, or if they are graduated senior, which I'll get into. It's kind of like some caveats there, but um, kind of just points out the maximum hours per week that they can work would be 40. And then there's also status two in the case that they're enrolled halftime or more. Then yes, the maximum they can work is 20. It's kind of just like maybe hopefully an easier way for them to kind of maybe understand and to, report back to you. That way you have kind of a better idea as far as what you're going to need to submit in the student module versus, the students you can kind of just leave active and that will kind of take care of. I see a hand raised. Emmanuel?
Eric, can you go back a slide? I was just jotting down a note, which ones I may need to change for the summer if they were more than halftime.
Sure. So this is in reference, I'm mainly referring at this moment now to the 1870 student assistant positions. And if they're enrolled under halftime, then you would need to hire them under 1874, which is the taxable student assistant.
Perfect. Thank you.
Sure, no problem. But yes, going back to the form, uh, you would be able to provide this to your student. It will be available on the HR toolkit. Um, if it's not posted already, it should be posted by end of this week. But essentially, you provide them with a memo that kind of explains the situation for summer, and then with this form, they fill it out and then they provide it back to you. They can only select one status and they return the form, and you don't need to send it over to us. It's mainly more just for your internal use only, just so whoever the department coordinator is or whoever handles student hiring, which here, you know how to enter into the student module. So that's kind of the point of this form. So yes, so what actions need to happen for students who are enrolled at halftime or more? So status two. Um, so we're asking the departments to communicate to your students that they must be enrolled in summer courses by May 30th in order to continue as 1870. HR will validate all enrollment on that date and perform the mass separation. For those who plan to enroll but couldn't for any reason by that time, the record will be handled manually, with the termination being removed from their 1870 record. So for that last point, just reach out to your HR operations technician for your department. We also have a roster listing available on the HR website, where you can find that out if you don't know who it is. But pretty much just try to work with us so we can remove the separation from the 1870 record, and we're able to validate the enrollment to show that, okay, they are actually at halftime. But yeah, the reason is kind of like it's kind of a hard date that we need to go by, which is the last business day in May, and just to prevent any kind of, students reporting time under 1870 in June pay period when they shouldn't be, which definitely causes a lot of problems on the payroll side and having to do all those corrections. So it's better maybe just to have these small number of exceptions here where, the student didn't get the chance to enroll, versus having to do like way more cleanup because we waited. So that's kind of the reason behind the choice in date here. So yes, so which student assistants would be subject to taxes? So if the student does not enroll in any summer session, or if they enroll less than half time, so like I mentioned, under 6 units if they're undergraduate, or under 4 units if they're graduate level, you would need to hire under 1874, which is the taxable student assistant. Excuse me. The effective dates that you would use in the student module, and I'll go into it later, but uh, just just so you're aware, the effective date would be June 1st, 2025, and you would use the end date July 30th, 2025. Now, sometimes for pay periods, for a given month, they don't usually line up with the first day and the last day of the month. I mean, it'd be great if it did, but that's just not how it works, nor when we're calculating the number of working days in a given month. So sometimes the month may end a day short. It may go into the next month. So that's why we're asking you to use July 30th and not the 31st, because that is the last day of the July pay period. The 1874 taxable student assistant position is used for the summer months of June and July. Those are mainly the months that we're looking at. And I'll talk about the transition into August and kind of reverting everyone back with using uh, their fall enrollment. While they're under the 1874 uh, taxable student assistant job code, they can work up to 40 hours per week. You see some questions in the chat here. So, Teresa, if they are enrolled less than half time, can they work 40 hours? Yes. So if they're enrolled less than half time for their particular, either undergraduate or graduate level, then yes, they can work up to 40 hours. Let's see, Selena, for students graduating this May, is 7:30 the last day they can work on campus? So not necessarily. I'll explain more as far as graduating students and kind of how the department should go about handling their records. We're going with 7:30 as the default date, but I'll explain how to do an extension in the case for this particular group of students. Um, and how to extend that 1874 record for graduating seniors. Um, all right, one more question, then I'll have to move on. So, Bernadette, for a student graduating this summer, can they work? Yes. And I will explain more. So stay tuned. Oops. There we go. All right. So for some, this may be review, but for others, if you're brand new here or if you just haven't done this before, I will kind of go and kind of give a step-by-step instruction on how to hire a student in the student module. And then I'll use the 1874 as the example here, given that that's kind of the majority of the transactions you'll need to focus on here. So to begin, you in the CSUN portal, you just need to log in, and then you go into the top bar, the navigation bar under HR. You select HR admin. It should take you to this page that you're seeing here, and then you select student employment. Now, obviously, your options may vary. It may not look like this, but what you're looking for is something that says student employment. From here, it'll take you to the student employee search page. Here, you would search for the student that you would like to hire. We strongly suggest that you search for your student based on their employee or student ID, or if possible, if you know it, their national ID, which is their social security number. Um, this is just to prevent hiring a student with a very common name. Uh, you hire the wrong person, which has happened before, where departments, they're maybe having to hire a number of students. They get someone, John Smith, and there's probably multiple John Smiths, and you hire the wrong one, and then it causes problems once that student signs in, and then, oops, they have a different employee, ID number. Now we have to, you know, cancel that appointment and then have to ask the department to hire them again. So just to prevent that kind of type of headache and, God forbid, submitting hours under that erroneous record or anything like that, um, or submitting hours, yeah. Try to search for their employee ID or the national ID if you have it. But yes, from here, it'll take you to the student job summary page. I'm showing an example of a student who already has kind of some active records and kind of what that would look like. But let's say we're taking this student and we're going to hire them, uh, in an academic department. You can see they currently have some active records, some are separated. But what we're going to do here, we're going to select Add Student Concurrent Job. So we're just going to create a new record for this student. and it'll take you to this page. From here, this is kind of what the default kind of page will look like for entering a hire. So, like I mentioned before, for the 1874s, in this example, you'll be changing the effective date to June 1st, 2025. The effective date defaults to today's date, so make sure to adjust it and review before you hit save. Just want to make sure we're not, getting too hasty or putting them into, let's say you're doing it in May, it may default to a May effective date, which is incorrect. If we're, doing these 1874s for the summer transition. So please review the effective date, make sure it looks correct. Use June 1st. For action reason, HIR is already populated as it's the only transaction we can use for the hire. But you'll type in CON, or if you hit that magnifying glass, it'll be the only option available to you. So HIR CON is the action reason coding. For the position number, if you don't have it on hand, or if you don't know it, you can use a search icon, the magnifying glass, to locate it using your corresponding department ID and job code. So when you click that magnifying glass, bring out hundreds of position numbers, but a way to kind of filter it down. If you search by using the department ID and then also using the job code, it'll populate with, or you'll be able to narrow it down significantly to find the active position number that you need. If it doesn't exist, please give your operations technician a call, so we can just help you to establish that. But yes, what needs to be adjusted? Yes, the hourly rate. So the hourly rate for this 1874 transition, their rate should match their 1870 salary. In the case that, this question has come up, I want to pay my student a little bit higher, because they're being taxed. So I want to make sure to kind of offset the difference. As far as what I've understood from class and comp, that's not necessarily allowed, for you to do unless it is a genuine merit increase that needs to be awarded. But in any questions in regards to adjusting their salary and making it different from their 1870 or increasing it, please contact classification and compensation. Yes, and also you need to enter in an expected end date. In the past, I may have mentioned for certain job codes that you don't need to enter an expected end date. We're kind of doing away with that. Every job that is entered in the student module requires an end date. So in this case, for this 1874 position, it shows up as blank by default, but please enter July 30th, 2025. Then you hit save. And rehiring, I mean, a little bit more cut and dry, but I'll kind of just show you. So instead of hitting add student concurrent job, we just want to add on to this terminated record, that we can see here under student current job. You can see that they have a position under 1874 and we want to rehire them. So we click the add button. From here, it'll take us to this page. Again, kind of the same thing that I mentioned before, except that the action reason that we're going to be using is REH, REH. That's the three character codes that we use for these types of transactions. But yeah, it's kind of the same thing as a hire. Just more to review as far as the taxable portion for these 1874 students. They would fall under the part-time seasonal temporary retirement plans, or PST. This would, be affecting their June and July 2025 pre-tax gross earnings. So it would be 7.5 contributed to the plan and 1.45 to Medicare. It may be withdrawn 90 days after a complete separation from any employment on campus. Just to reiterate, it is applied for the June and the July pay period. So these are the dates associated with that. Like I mentioned, they're not don't always line up with the start of the month, and the end of the month. Sometimes there's variance in the dates. And as far as our payroll calendar, this is how it would look. Okay. So like for the 1874s, if your student completes hourly student the summer form and it indicates summer status one, so just keep those forms. You need to send it to us. Hire your 1870 students into the 1874 job code. Like I mentioned, notify us if the job code for your department does not exist. We would need to set that up for you. And yes, anyone who requires their special system access to be retained will need an active 1874 job. I mentioned here the effective date, but what I mean to say is that it should be done by end of day May 30th, if they're not continuing as 1870, um, just because they will be affected by that 1870 separation. And then once you hire them in 1874, you'll need to request that special system access again. So to kind of prevent that, just to make sure that they have a continuous appointment, by end of day May 30th, have these students with an active 1874 job. Okay, as for international students, excuse me, 1868 students will remain their job code. So there's no kind of moving them or transitioning them into another job code. Um, yeah, they would remain there. They must have a valid work authorization or to work in the summer. Um, they must be enrolled full time in spring and fall, um, just to make sure that they're, valid and continuing, and or have a, eligibility to work. But yes, verify that your students have a valid appointment if they're continuing through the summer. I'll explain what I mean by that, as far as entering in an extension on the student's record. It's kind of similar in the way that I showed for a rehire. It looks kind of similar like that, but I'll explain a little bit more on how to extend an appointment and how to, maintain that active status. The reason for this is because um, they'll be included in the mass separation process on May 30th. Um, the summer enrollment rules, essentially are like 1870, except instead of, transferring them over, it's just more related to the hours, as far as the maximum that they're allowed to work. So if your 1868 student is enrolled half-time or more in the summer, then, business as usual, they can work 20 hours maximum. But if they are not enrolled or under half-time, then they can work up to 40 hours. I think I saw a question in the chat here. Let's see. That's right. As far as the expected end dates, yeah, I'll touch on that a little bit later. So stay tuned on that. I just want to just cover the rest of this. So sorry, one sec. Okay. And then for instructional student assistants, the ISAs, so 1150 and 1152 job codes will not change. Those will remain the same. And like I mentioned with 1868s, so just verify that your students have a valid appointment if they're continuing through the summer. That is the department's responsibility to do, to extend their appointments. If they are not, and their end date is anything prior to, the end of the month, if it defaults to the end of the, semester end date and all that, they'll be included in the mass separation process. Um, but yes, as far as, you know, post separation or for those that remain active, HR will change the retirement coding as appropriate for the months of June and July, um, depending on whether or not they are at the enrollment threshold for 1150s. Okay. So yes, validating your 1150 and 1868 appointments. So how would that work? Um, and so, Michelle, this would kind of go to your question, as far as extending an employee if you know that they're going to remain under 1870 beyond that semester end date. I'll kind of explain how that works. So even though I mentioned 1150, 1868, this can also be applied to your 1870s. Um, okay, so how do you know what effective date to use? What is my employee's end date? The way to look this up is by, once you go to the student module, go to your student's record, you select job history on their employee record. And from here, it'll kind of explain, what was there. It's in order from most to least recent, and it'll kind of show uh, the expected job end date kind of populated there. And then that is what you'll use to know to if you're going to extend them or to give their appointment an extension, you'll have to use the following day. And what I mean is the following calendar day, not the following business day. Um, Especially in this case, the expected job end date of May 23rd is a Friday. So you wouldn't use the following Monday. You would just use the next calendar day. So it would be May 24th. But yeah, so student job history, provides a lot of context and a lot of information as far as your student's record. In case you don't have it on hand or aren't able to access it, you'll be able to find it here. The compensation rate, effective date of transaction, and expected end date. Okay, so for these extensions that I'm referring to, um, in this example, for the student who has separated or has an expected job end date of May 23rd, 2025, um, the effective date defaults to today's date. So make sure to adjust it. And in this case, we're going to be using May 24th, 2025, so one calendar day after. Action reason, it'll be DTA APT. So what that means is data change, new temporary appointment. That's the code that will be used in order for us to kind of transact this extension. Position number, there should be no change, and make sure to change the expected job end date. Um, it by default, it'll have the previous end date, so please update, in this case, to the end of the summer, which would be August 19th, 2025. Yes, so for work study students, so they cannot be scheduled to work beyond May 15th. Um, so departments, as far as their deadline to report time work, that would be May 16th, 2025. And to approve the timesheets, the deadline is May 19th, 2025. Uh, and yeah, like we need to reiterate, this one kind of involves a little bit more of uh, a process involved here where, not only are you have to moving them from 1870 to 1874, given if they're under enrolled, you would have to move them for these work study students, effective May 16th into 1870. So let's say 1871 currently, they all, last day to work is May 15th. So effective May 16th, move them into 1870. They work the remainder of May. Depending on their enrollment situation, they either remain as 1870 or you would have to hire them under 1874, effective June 1st. So a lot to remember, but as far as for the work study students, it's just one extra step. Um, but yes, so human resources will mass separate all work study student positions on May 16th. And yeah, there is no work study allocated for the summer months of June and July. All right, on to graduating seniors. So an update to campus practice that we rolled out last year, but wanted to continue going forward with this. So graduating seniors are allowed to work during the summer session. So as far as 1870s are concerned, so if they, you know, are truly and honestly just separated as far as, they finished their degree, they're graduating spring 2025, so they will not be enrolled in any units for the summer. They're not wrapping up anything. Um, then yes, they will be a part of the 1874 process. Um, like I mentioned, June 1st, 2025 through to July 30th, 2025. Um, so if they're not planning on continuing for a graduate program at CSUN or anything like that, then they can technically work until the end of the summer session, so until August 19th. But you'll need to do an employment extension, kind of similar to the way that I showed in the few slides previous. It'll be kind of done exactly the same, except for this 1874 position, to extend them effective July 31st through to August 19th. But they cannot work beyond that date. They would need to be separated and end work completely by that point. Um, However, if they are enrolling in fall in a type of graduate program at CSUN, um, then they can be rehired under that new student job class that I was mentioning at the start of the presentation under 1860 or 1861 on July 31st, which is the first day of the August pay period. And yes, I will send a reminder email closer to mid-July as far as this kind of transition. Um, and yeah, and final note, as far as 1868s, they would not be eligible for this kind of provision to allow them to work during the summer. If they are 1868 and they are graduating seniors and they are completely finished, um, and if, receive their degree and all that and are not enrolled in anything, the last day they can work is the last day of the semester, which is May 23rd, 2025. I do see some questions. Just to kind of, for the sake of time, I want to make sure to get through this presentation and I'll answer those questions once we get to the Q&A section at the end. We're getting close to the end, so just hang in there. As far as time and labor, as far as submitting time and entering time for these student assistants, I kind of want to break it down just month by month, just to kind of get an idea of what that would look like. So in May, the timekeeper might need to enter time by a day view option if for whatever reason it's not allowing you to enter in time. If you select week or time period, that's usually our advisement. If you're trying to submit time, and it's like, for whatever reason, it's like grayed out or, it just won't let you enter anything in or save, try entering in time by the day option. Just a reminder for this summer transition, no 1874 hours in the May pay period. And for that final week, May 26th through to May 30th, the 1870 students can work up to 40 hours. So yes, even though you haven't transitioned them yet into the 1874 position, which will be effective June 1st, for that period of time, post the semester concluding, they can work up to 40 hours that week. And yes, on to June. So June 1st to June 30th. Please do not report June hours until your students have been hired in the appropriate job code. Especially given this transition, I want to make sure that, if they're moving into 1874, please have their hours submitted under that record. Otherwise, it requires a lot of cleanup, afterwards. As far as July, the last day for self-reporters to enter in time for their 1874 positions would be July 30th. Students would not have access to timesheet past this date. And yes, we currently have the 1874 separation scheduled for July 30th. And timekeepers can still enter time by the time entry deadline, even if the record is terminated. Yes, monitoring your students' hours. So for the summer months of June and July, uh, again, to review, maximum work hours depend on job code and cumulative summer enrollment. So 1870s, they can't exceed more than 20 hours per week if they're, have to or more. ISAs and 1868s may work up to 40 hours per week if they are not enrolled or under half-time enrollment. We need to post a comment 40-hour eligible. Otherwise, they may not exceed 20 hours per week. Okay, for August, that is from July 31st to August 31st. Students may work up to 40 hours per week through August 19th if they are not enrolled half-time or more in summer sessions 1 or 3. Just need to post a comment 40-hour eligible, otherwise they may not exceed 20 hours. The first day of the fall 2025 semester is Wednesday, August 20th. What that means is that there's a split week of, academic and non-academic days being in the same week. And so for the week of August 18th through the 22nd, the maximum hours allowed would be 28. And yes, this might be, pretty cut and dry, but as far as for hourly student employees, they are paid on a mid-monthly basis. That hasn't changed for the summer as well. So they will be paid through, the timesheet you enter in their time, and then they get paid out. So it's kind of scheduled out, just to make sure that everyone's clear on that. That time in May is uh, time worked in May is paid out in June, time worked in June is paid out in July, and so on and so forth. The judge just wanted to provide the dates there, just so everyone's kind of aware, and when the payments will be issued, on or around that date that I show there. Yes, so for new students who are working or beginning in the fall, they are not eligible to work in the summer. So the first day of the August 2025 pay period would be July 31st, 2025. That's the first day they can work. And as a reminder, that would be under the 1860 or 1861 job code. But more to come on that, and we'll explain in a later webinar. Uh, Prior to starting work, those new students must reach out to HR customer service at csun.edu to schedule a sign-in completion, and they need to sign in with HR on or before their first day of employment, just to make sure they're in compliance with I-9 rules and all that. And yes, during the regular fall spring semesters, 1870 students were to be eligible to work half-time or more. ISAs, TAs, and GAs, so academic student employees under the R11 bargaining unit, that's 1 unit or more. And non-citizen status students or student employees 1868 need to be enrolled at full-time. So full-time is considered in this purpose as 12 units for graduate. I believe it's 8 for graduate level. But yes, if you have any questions on the summer forms or on the process on hiring your students, you can contact your HR operations technician. If you have questions on your students' eligibility to work, or as far as the you want to enter in a higher rate for the student when they're entering into 1874, reach out to classification and compensation. I provided their email there. If you have questions on entering time for the summer and using the timesheet in general, please reach out to your HR payroll technician. And if you have questions specific about academic student employees who fall under R11 bargaining unit and their eligibility to work, you can reach out to faculty affairs. And yes, if you have questions on summer faculty in general, please reach out to faculty affairs. We will be having a presentation tomorrow covering summer faculty, where they will be joining me in presenting. So if some of you hopefully might be there, we'll see you there. But okay, so that is all.